Aloha y bienvenidos to Latin Connection. I'm Richard Concepcion. There are many different activities and celebration that is happening in the month of October, and today we are giving very special attention to domestic violence awareness. Today's guest is Charito Rivera. She is a domestic violence prevention specialist, and she's here to help us to understand about domestic violence, what it is, how we can prevent it, how affect the community, and how we can get help. Charito, welcome to Latin Connection.
Muchas gracias
De
for
nada.
having me here. Definitely, domestic violence is a very important issue because it does not affect only one community, it affects every community.
Well, we're so happy that you're here to help us to understand what is happening with domestic violence. But before we start, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and tell me what inspired you to become a domestic violence prevention specialist?
And I do have my master's degree in social work, and the reason I got into the domestic violence is when I did a volunteer work. So ever since then, I don't know, just something kept me going, and I've been in it for more than 10 years.
How do you define domestic violence?
Definition, okay, so domestic violence, definitely you want to remember that it's a pattern of abuse, because sometimes people often mistaken like, oh, he hit me or she hit me, and then that's abuse. It's a pattern of behaviors where it actually keeps the other person from doing what they want to do, thinking how they want to think, and acting the way they want to act. They're being controlled by their perpetrator, or known as abuser. So it's a pattern of behavior. So for example, if you hit the other person and like you hit me and then I say, hey, I don't like that, even though you're joking, right? But I don't like it. You keep doing that and you know that I don't like it, eventually I might end up saying it becomes a norm, but I still don't like it.
Give me some of the signs that we need to be looking for. Like you say, you say I didn't like it, he continued. Give me some of the signs that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, and it's subtle. Sometimes you don't even notice it. So there's a cycle of abuse that we know of, and in the cycles there's three, where there's the honeymoon phase, where you're in a new relationship, it's like, everything is good, and the next thing you know, there's like maybe just pushing like, hey, how, and then you're like, oh, or maybe it's just something normal. But
could be an
sometimes
argument.
sometimes that's already a sign that it's like, it escalates to something more. Because we just that joking around, sometimes just teasing you on how you look, and it makes you feel down, and you let them know that's not okay. Sometimes it's also already controlling, like money-wise, in the beginning, and even sexually too. There's signs where forces sex on you, and even though you say no. So there's many signs, and when you see when you're like, oh, this is not right, this is not something I don't want, or I'm not comfortable, that's when you know it's a sign that, okay, maybe I need to reevaluate this, or I need to talk to somebody.
So Charito, who is at risk? Anybody?
All socioeconomics background, poor, rich. We've had clients from coast of Waianae to Hawaii Kai. We've had doctors, we've had homeless. So it doesn't discriminate. It affects all communities at all levels. Education, non-educated people, it's all. It
Wow.
affects everyone, especially kids.
Yeah, the kids always suffer, when the situations is stressful for them and within the family. Can you give me some example about abuse and what we can be aware of those sorts of abuses?
Sure, and I'm gonna just read this off because this is according to Hawaii law.
Okay.
One thing that everybody needs to remember is domestic violence is against the law. So that means you can get arrested and you can be jailed. So I'll go ahead and read that off because it does gives us the examples of abuse as well, and I can go ahead and talk more about it.
Okay.
So Hawaii law defines domestic violence as the occurrence of one or more of the following things between family or household members. Physical harm, that's obviously, slapping, kicking, even keeping the person in the room when they say, let me go, and you're like, no, you stay here, or you lock them up. That's considered physical abuse. Bodily injury, Again, anytime that you injure a person, whether it's from hitting them with an object or with your hands. Threat of imminent physical harm, bodily injury, or assault. So, for example, for militaries,
Okay.
they have weapons. They have access to
That's
weapons.
true.
Even just showing their weapon, lifting their uniforms out and showing that they have gun in there, that's considered threatening. Or putting a knife on the table. You
Oh,
don't
that's
necessarily
intimidating.
you don't necessarily have to you don't necessarily have to point it at them or anything. So that's threatening. Or even going like this but doesn't go all the way. Like you and me are having an argument, I'm going like that, and that's already example of threatening. Okay, and it says here too, extreme psychological abuse. So abuse, when we think about it, we only think physical, but there's actually the social abuse, where nowadays there's digitals,
Oh, wow, yeah, correct.
Facebook,
Facebook, Instagram.
Instagrams, and so there's what we call now the social abuse, where a partner may control or like what they have or gain access to that because they want to control who you can be friends with, who you can hang out with, who you can contact, and whatnot. And so another example of type of abuse is financial. So that's when gaining their, what do you call that, access to their bank accounts without their permission, or taking everything out, or counting every penny that their partner spends. Also, of course, sexual abuse. That's a big one, because not only for adults but also for children. When a person says no, it means no. So that's what everybody just needs to remember. And
Wow.
children cannot say no sometimes, right? And children should not be subjected to any type of sexual abuse. That means showing them naked people, pictures, or showing yourself, or even saying that, using foul language around them too. That's because, again, that could affect them in the long run. Okay, so one thing to remember again is domestic violence is against the law, and you can be jailed for.
So what is the effect a person or the family will feel? Is it depressed, suicidal? What about the kids in that relationship?
Yeah, so just imagine as adults, when there's abuse happening in the family, we get depressed, we can't go to work, or if it affects our daily activities. Imagine a child who cannot even really express how they feel. So with adults, where you go through depression, where you can't function no more, you lose your job, and next thing you know, you lose your family also. Because one other forms of abuse is isolation. The perpetrator isolates their partner. Especially for militaries, I find that, I've seen it, where they're on the island, they're far away from their relatives or friends, and cut off communication. First, sometimes it
Oh,
starts
wow.
off with cell phone. Next thing you know, they don't have access to internet, and then they can't visit, whatnot. So there's all that. And with children, let's talk about the long term and short term. So for children, that saying, monkey see, monkey do.
Yes.
So they may see their mother and father, or their parents,
Yeah, they're fighting.
are fighting, and growing up, when they're in a relationship, maybe he or she will yell at their partner, because that's how they saw mom and dad got their way.
Oh, that's
by
a good
yelling.
point. Yeah.
And sometimes too, their mind may not remember, but their body remembers it physiological reaction to things. So if they had been subjected to domestic violence as a young kid, and in adult life, when they are in an environment there's abuse happening, they may react they might do the flight, where they just want to be out, or they go in and be part of that scene where they fight.
Wow.
Because again, it's that where this is normal and it's okay, So if they've been into domestic violence as a kid and they get into a relationship and it gets abusive, or that's the only
Only
way
thing you
they
know how to
know
do,
how to
right?
communicate, by threatening their partner or by abusing their partner, by controlling them.
So what is the risk like a person is taking in this type of relationship?
That's putting your life in danger. And sometimes we gotta ask ourselves, is this worth it? You know, and I mentioned it earlier, the signs. So when you have that gut feeling already that this is not right, I'm not okay with this, that's when you know that you need to talk to somebody. And it's tempting to just talk to friends only, but it's also okay to ask for help. And it's even better to ask help with somebody you don't know, because that person is they have liability not to tell somebody.
I was going to ask you that. Why is that always go to a person who doesn't know the couple?
It's good. And one I just mentioned, which is they're liable to hold things confidential.
Okay.
There's what we call the HIPAA law.
Okay.
So say that I'm a domestic violence counselor and you come to me. I cannot go to somebody else and say, oh, Richard came to me and he has domestic violence issues. Or if your family calls our agency, for example, and asking, I cannot tell them, oh, Richard called me also and talk about domestic violence in your family. Like, I can't
Wow.
do that. So I highly, highly recommend, and I know that culturally, sometimes don't air out your
Don't happen
laundry,
that way,
right?
yes.
But I'd say, please, seek help before it's too late. Because we've seen it in the islands, how many deaths already happened because of domestic violence. How many children already suffered because of domestic violence. So always seek help, and seek help with, it can start with just calling 911.
So let me ask you, a lot of people ask themselves this question: why a person who's a victim stay in a relationship?
And I used to ask that question before I got into the field. But being in the field for more than 10 years now, I understand more so. And even going through the same experience, I'd say, that there's the hope. Number one is that hope that the other person is going to change. Other reasons could be financial. If, for example, if the husband already has been working, providing financial, if she leaves, where is she going to get money? That's the question in their mind, not knowing that there's help available. There's agencies who will be able to provide financial assistance. And we can mention those in the resource that we're going to list down.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
So let's take a quick break and we
Okay.
continue talking about domestic violence after this break. Okay?
Okay.
Aloha Latin Connection. I'm Dr. Carmen Jimenez, psychotherapist and educator. Are you a victim of domestic violence? If so, you're not alone. Domestic violence is a pattern of abuse associated with control and power against someone's will. Say no to violence. Reach out for help.
Welcome back to Latin Connection. I'm here with my guest Charito Rivera talking about domestic violence awareness. So thank you so much for coming and help us to understand what domestic violence is all about.
Thank you also on behalf of everyone who need this information. And I do hope that I'm helping somebody out there who may never know about domestic violence or what to do with it. And There's always information so available now online, but sometimes again they don't even have that access. So hopefully TV.
Yeah, we get them the information they need. We was talking about, you know, the different type of relationship, why the victim stay in that type of relationship. If for any reason they do stay in that relationship, how can keep themselves safe in an environment that has so much violence?
Yeah, and I was mentioning earlier where somebody with hope, like, oh, I'm hoping my partner is gonna change. How are you gonna keep yourself safe while you're hoping?
You're hoping, yes.
So then you want to make sure that you have a bag that has a copy of your ID, if not originals. Copy of your ID, birth certificates, everything in one bag. And also just ready to go, something like that. Should that time comes that you need to leave, you know. And if you don't have time to pick it up, just go. You know, I've had women who comes in the office just underwear.
Wow.
It's just for safe. But how do they keep themselves safe? So when say that you're in a confrontation and the door is in front of you, you don't want to move that way, backwards. You want your back to be going towards the door. You don't want to put yourself in a corner. Because then if you need to leave, you need to run, how are you going to run?
That's
if you
a good
put yourself in a corner. That's one way. Financially, how can you keep yourself safe? It's always smart, of course, to have your own savings, but I don't know how you and your partner have made plans or agreed on those things. But it's always good to have some kind of cash also in that bag that I was talking about earlier. And then again, let other people know. Call 911, because even if you're not having your partner arrest or whatnot, at least there's a record. If you gone to the doctor, mention that you are going through relationship and whatnot, and they can refer you. These are you're creating tracks already. And how is that keeping you safe? Because should you go to let's hope that it doesn't get deadly. Should you end up in court, for example, you have all these records already to back you up. Because sometimes too, most of abusers are manipulators. You're gonna end up the abuser, and they're the victims. You know, so having records, and also when you are in a situation like I mentioned earlier already that it's escalating, be that person and say, you know, this is not going good. Let's take a break. Let's take a time out. Be that person, and it's okay. Sometimes that may be a sign of weakness, but that might just save your life and your partner's life, because things escalate.
That's true.
Oh, two people too angry that they don't even know what they're saying or what they're doing anymore, could end up deadly. And that's how most of those domestic violence with one partner, two partner death, because of that. Not one of them said, you know what, I love you enough to just say enough, time out, let's take a time. This is not going to go any further good, like, you know, nothing's good going to come out of this, let's take a time out.
And how they can protect the kids, because they're so concerned about protecting themselves now. They have kids, and the way, you know, they have children in the house, it becomes more difficult, right?
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because with kids, kids can be taken away actually. Once
Would that escalate the problem as well?
oh yes, definitely. Because say that you need to follow a restraining order, there's kids involved, they get taken away. Say that the police is called, and I'm hoping that this is not going to keep people from calling the police. But if there's children involved, and I mean there's children in the house and there's fighting, especially physical violence, they can be taken away.
So how can we help that person without getting into a confrontation with a person who is the person who aggressive? How can we help?
Say that I would say that there's an argument happening. maybe like, keep your distance and be able to say something if they, whatever your relationship with them are. But to be on the safe side, and there's already a physical altercation going on, call 911 immediately. Call 911 immediately. I mean, you want to be like, make yourself known that you are there, because sometimes when the abuser sees that, they kind of tend to more like, oh, somebody is watching, but some don't care.
Yeah,
So
how can you diffuse the situation? You don't want to.
You want to take action right away. So somebody call 911 or something, and at the same time try to talk to them in a calming manner. And sometimes like calling them names, like, hey, you so and so, like, don't do that to her or don't do that to him. It might just escalate also. So getting into a different subjects and whatnot, I've seen that happen, and that comes like, whoa, what? Where did that come from? And if, depending on the relationship, I suppose, but how can you help them if, let's say, they're your friend, they're coming to you and say, hey, I have this problem in my relationship, then let's talk about it, and then let them know that there's a help available out there, and then you can let them know that, hey, I'm here for you. Like, just be that lending ear. It's easy sometimes to ask those questions like,
Sure.
why are you staying? Just leave.
Yeah, that's
Well, maybe there's children they're thinking of. Especially, that's one of the reasons actually why victims stay, because there's children. So again, it's easy to ask this question like, why are you staying? But again, if you're there to help, you're not just going to leave also.
So if you decide to leave, where they can go? Do they have places, or they just go to the family, friends?
Okay, yeah, good question. Because if you're a victim of domestic violence and you want to leave, there are places available for you. So, for example, shelters. I can't tell you exactly where they are, but they are available on the island of Oahu and other islands as well, such as Kauai, Big Island, Maui, you name it. There's help available. So on Oahu, there's also shelter for the military, and there's also programs for the military. And then for the general public, we do have 4 emergency shelters they can go to on this island.
And what happened after they leave? They want to stay safe. Are they afraid to maybe run into the person at Walmart? What happened after you leave?
Ooh, it's a small island.
It's a small island, yes.
Right?
So what would happen?
So definitely file a restraining order. And I've heard a lot from people don't, because it's just a piece of paper. But that's just another people, trace that, like, all this behavior, all these abusive behaviors. You're creating, in a way, you're building a case. Right, so that just in case you do have to go to court and whatnot, say that it doesn't get deadly, right? So, and anyhow, sorry. So, file a restraining order, because when you file a restraining order, that's supposed to keep the person 100 yards away from you, and also it keeps them from calling you and from contacting you in any other form, and not even involving third party.
Wow.
And there are 2 types. So, if the abuser is say you've been married to him or her, it's ex-husband, ex-wife, or your current spouse, maybe you're not living together or never been married, but you do have children together, you go to the family court for the restraining order. And then if no intimate relationship, then you go to the district court for that. So the restraining order is a 2 type, where the first one is a temporary restraining order. It lasts, I believe, 180 days. But after 15 days, you go to court. You go back to court.
So you're going to go back to court to
That-
reinstate?
That gives the abuser the opportunity to say there's no need for the restraining order to continue.
Okay.
There's their moment to prove that they can be safe. And if the judge though feels that no, it's better that then the restraining order becomes order of protection for however long the judge says.
Wow.
And as the victim, they
It's
can say,
difficult.
I've seen it too, where they're like, I don't want to ever see her for a lifetime. but there are kids involved.
There's kids
So-
involved. Did it always end in a divorce?
No, I've seen couples also who gone to domestic violence shelter, or they gone separately but got back together. Why? Because when everybody works together, the system works. Everybody do their part. I've seen couples where, oh my gosh, you would never think that they're ever gonna end up again, but that's why there's this organizations. They sought help, and the perpetrator can say, even the abuser can say, you know what, I have a problem and I want help. And then the victim can say, I too have a problem and I need help. Because you gotta take responsibility for your own actions and for your or lack of action thereof. Because as a victim, you play that part, or you can be a survivor and say, this is not okay. We can get help because I want to stay with you. Or I'm going to get help. This is not okay, but I'm going to get help anyway because I want to have a better life or better relationship should I go into another relationship. So either way, it's a win-win situation when we take accountability for our own actions or our own behaviors.
Let me ask you last question. Domestic violence is not always the male against the female. It's many different ways. Can you
Definitely
elaborate
not.
about
And
that?
that's why I apologize, because you might hear me say he or
He or
she.
she is right.
So you might be like, what is she talking about? And that's the reason why, because it happens to men also. And sometimes too, it's very underreported. You see this statistics, and I'm not mentioning statistics because sometimes people think like, oh, it's just women, feminism, No, it happens in men also. The statistic you see is higher in women, and you can see it because strength-wise, who's bigger, who's stronger? Men.
True.
And sometimes too, it's underreported because there's that shame factor where
Man, we don't report anything, right?
yeah. So you won't see that. You don't really see accurate statistic. That's why I don't really mention us. But it happens in both men and women, and again, children, which
Wow.
is the most devastating one.
Well, we're running out of time. Thank you much for coming to Latin Connection and help us to understand what domestic violence is all about. And we want to say thank you so much for watching Latin Connection. And don't forget, if you want to be part of the show, you can get in contact with me at richconcept@gmail.com. And together we can stop and prevent domestic violence. Thank you. Gracias.